Welcome back to Inside Dark History, where we uncover the forgotten corners of the past. Today, I'm taking you into a story about the macabre history of the Grayson family. A sinister tale that you might have never heard before, a mystery buried in the dust of time, a truth that will send shivers down your spine. But before we embark on this journey, take a moment to let me know, where are you listening to this story from? That helps me understand how far these secrets have traveled. And if this story truly captivates you, if it makes you ponder, don't hesitate to give me a like and subscribe to the channel to keep me going. Together, we'll explore the darkest pages of history, and you won't want to miss a thing. In the remote, unforgiving hills of eastern Oregon, a chilling truth lies buried beneath a century of official silence and forgotten earth. Between the years 1852 and 1888, over 800 pioneers vanished along a mere 20-mile stretch of the iconic Oregon Trail. They didn't succumb to the ravages of disease, nor did they fall victim to the countless accidents that plagued westward expansion and claimed so many lives. No, their fate was orchestrated by something far more sinister, far more methodical, a silent predator lurking in the shadows of nascent civilization. The Sacred Heart Chapel, a humble wooden structure promising salvation to weary, dying travelers, was in fact the chilling epicenter of the most calculated mass murder scheme in American frontier history. This was no impulsive act of violence, no desperate crime of opportunity. What began as isolated, inexplicable disappearances quickly escalated into a horrifying family enterprise, so cold, so ruthlessly efficient, it redefined the very essence of evil. The perpetrators, a seemingly pious family, didn't just kill for greed. They refined murder into an art form, meticulously documenting every life they extinguished, every family they shattered, and every dream they buried in unmarked graves, hidden beneath the very soil they claimed to sanctify. The sheer scale and systematic nature of their atrocities remained a whisper on the wind, a suppressed horror for generations. The Oregon Trail itself, stretching like a frayed lifeline across the vast American frontier, embodied both desperate hope and inescapable peril. For the thousands of families who had sold everything they owned, severing ties with the familiar East and clinging to the precarious promise of a new life in the West, each mile of that arduous 2,000-mile journey was a testament to their unwavering resolve, their resilience against overwhelming odds. They dreamed of fertile lands, new beginnings, and freedom, pushing forward against every conceivable hardship. Yet beyond the relentless grip of disease that swept through camps like an invisible reaper, the gnawing pangs of starvation that hollowed out even the strongest, and the sudden, unpredictable fury of natural disasters that could erase a family. In an instant, an insidious new threat emerged in the rolling, seemingly benevolent hills of eastern Oregon. Here, amidst the serene landscapes and the vast, unpolished wilderness, death wore a disarming smile of Christian compassion, while its eyes, hidden behind a veneer of piety, coldly calculated the value of a family's dwindling possessions, their livestock, their tools, their very hopes and dreams. The year 1852 marked the apex of the Oregon Trail migration, a surge of humanity westward. Over 50,000 souls embarked on the treacherous journey, each wagon a microcosm of hope and vulnerability. By the time most wagon trains reached the imposing, wearying peaks of the Blue Mountains of Oregon, they had already traversed nearly 1,800 miles. The physical toll was immense. Families were utterly exhausted, their spirits frayed by relentless hardship. Supplies were critically low, often dwindling to bare essentials, and the weakest among them, the elderly, the very young, or those already predisposed to illness, frequently succumbed to ailments like trail fever, dysentery, or cholera. These unseen enemies transformed dreams of prosperity into desperate struggles for mere survival, leaving behind a trail of shallow graves and shattered aspirations. It was into this landscape of profound vulnerability where despair often outweighed hope that Father Grayson strategically established the Sacred Heart Chapel in 1851. This weathered wooden structure perched serenely on a hill, overlooking a natural stopping point along the trail, a place where weary travelers often paused to rest their oxen, repair broken wagons, and frequently to bury their dead. To the passing pioneers, desperate for any sign of comfort or divine intervention, the chapel appeared as nothing less than divine providence, a solitary beacon of hope in the vast, unforgiving wilderness, offering spiritual comfort and, if needed, a proper Christian burial for their lost loved ones, a final act of dignity in an often undignified journey. Its very existence seemed a miracle. At the heart of this deceptive sanctuary, orchestrating its sinister symphony, stood Father Grayson. He was a tall, gaunt man in his 40s with penetrating gray eyes that, though seemingly kind, held a chilling depth, as if capable of seeing through souls to gauge their worth. His voice, deep and resonant, commanded immediate respect, weaving eloquent tales of his divine calling to serve the spiritual needs of westward-bound families. His knowledge of Scripture, seemingly genuine and profound, was enough to disarm and convince even the most hardened skeptics among the trailblazers. Historical records from the era, though fragmented and often incomplete due to the chaos of frontier life, consistently spoke of the profound trust he managed to inspire in those he encountered. Beside him, playing her equally crucial part in this horrific charade, was his seemingly devoted wife, who adopted the benevolent name Sister Constance. Her gentle manner, soft voice, and apparent medical knowledge made her invaluable to families grappling with sick children or dying relatives. She moved with an aura of quiet competence, an angel of mercy in their desperate eyes, her hands seemingly capable of soothing any pain. The sinister trio was completed by Brother Ezekiel, Marai's younger sibling, a figure of practical competence. Ezekiel was a thou-vat, resourceful man, skilled with his hands, knowledgeable about livestock, and always ready to help struggling families repair their wagons or tend to their weary animals. He was the unassuming, approachable face of their operation, the one who would often stumble upon distressed travelers in their greatest need. Together, these three meticulously crafted an image of Christian charity so convincing, so perfectly tailored to the vulnerabilities of the pioneers, that it drew desperate families like moths to a deceptive, yet seemingly warm flame. The chapel itself, though outwardly modest, was impeccably maintained, hinting at a hidden order beneath its humble exterior. It was built from local timber, with a small, neatly kept cemetery adjacent to the main building, where victims of trail fever and dysentery were supposedly laid to rest with solemn ceremony. Inside, rough-hewn pews faced a simple altar adorned with a wooden cross that Marai proudly claimed to have carved himself, a symbol of faith crafted by hands that would soon commit unspeakable evils. Yet, the building held one distinctive feature that, in hindsight, served as an unsettling portent: an unusually large basement. The Graysons, with practiced ease, dismissed it as merely necessary storage for the generous supplies they claimed to keep on hand to aid destitute travelers. This detail, though seemingly innocuous, would later become a chilling piece of tangible evidence, a vault of stolen lives. The surrounding community was sparse, a scattering of isolated homesteads and a small distant trading post some 15 miles to the east. This extreme isolation, as federal investigators would later meticulously discover and document, served the Graysons exceptionally well, minimizing potential witnesses and drastically reducing the chance of outside interference. Local settlers who had, by chance, encountered the family generally spoke highly of them, praising their unparalleled generosity and unwavering Christian spirit. After all, they reasoned, who else would dedicate their lives so selflessly to ministering to dying strangers in the profound loneliness of the middle of nowhere? This seemingly perfect facade meticulously constructed on a foundation of profound trust and the overwhelming desperation of the pioneers, would soon become the most terrifying and effective weapon in their macabre arsenal, a tool for harvesting souls and fortunes alike. The carefully constructed facade of Christian charity, built by the Graysons, was about to face its first true test, a pivotal moment where their calculated deceptions would be put into motion against a truly vulnerable target. The year was 1852, and the stage was set for their horrifying design to unfold. The first recorded disappearance, though its grim timeline would only be meticulously pieced together decades later by diligent investigators, occurred on September 23, 1852. It involved the Morrison family, James, a man of quiet determination, his pregnant wife Elizabeth, her condition a symbol of fragile new life, their 3 young, innocent children, and Elizabeth's elderly father, Samuel. Like many families, they had been part of a larger wagon train that had dispersed upon reaching the vast, seemingly endless Oregon Territory. Confident in their ability to cover the remaining miles without the protection of a larger group, they decided to push on alone towards their final destination. This decision, born of independence and weary optimism, would prove to be a fatal miscalculation, leading them directly into the Graysons' carefully laid trap. Divine intervention, or so it seemed to the desperate James Morrison, arrived in the form of a broken wagon axle. The mishap occurred just 2 miles from the Sacred Heart Chapel, a stroke of uncanny luck for the Graysons. According to territorial records, James Morrison was later quoted as exclaiming that the chapel appeared like a gift from the Almighty when he spotted its humble silhouette from the ridge where his wagon had finally given out. It was then that Brother Ezekiel, a man with an almost preternatural ability to appear precisely when travelers were at their most vulnerable, materialized. He arrived at the broken wagon within mere hours of the accident, his demeanor calm and reassuring. "Brother," Ezekiel intoned, his voice slow and measured, a cadence that would become his chilling trademark. "The Lord has placed you near our humble chapel for a reason. Sister Constance has birthed many babies, and your Elizabeth looks ready to deliver any day now. Father Morai would consider it an honor to provide sanctuary while you repair your wagon and prepare for the blessed arrival." The Morrison family, overwhelmed by exhaustion and profound relief, gratefully accepted the invitation, moving into the small, seemingly cozy cabin adjacent to the chapel. It was a space the Graysons meticulously maintained for exactly such purposes, a comfortable snare for the unwary. For 3 days, a deceptive tranquility enveloped them. Sister Constance tended to Elizabeth with a gentle, almost saintly care. Brother Ezekiel, ever the practical helper, assisted James with the wagon repairs, his hands busy while his mind undoubtedly cataloged the family's possessions. Father Morai, meanwhile, provided spiritual comfort, his words a balm to the anxious family's souls. The children played freely in the chapel yard, their laughter echoing innocently, while Elizabeth's elderly father, Samuel, rested his arthritic bones in the cabin's comfortable rocking chair, believing himself safe and cared for. This idyllic scene, however, was merely the overture to a symphony of horror. On the 4th day, the insidious nature of the Graysons' charity began to reveal itself, subtly at first, then with escalating terror. Elizabeth's father, Samuel, was the first to fall gravely ill. He complained of severe stomach cramps and debilitating nausea, symptoms that Sister Constance, with practiced ease, attributed to trail sickness, a convenient catch-all term for the myriad ailments that plagued travelers on the arduous journey. With an air of solemn devotion, she began administering what she called blessed remedies, concoctions she meticulously prepared from herbs and other ingredients, ostensibly kept in the chapel's unusually large basement. "The Lord provides healing through nature's bounty," she would intone, her voice soft and reassuring. But sometimes the body must purge itself of toxins before the healing can begin. Within hours of taking Sister Constance's medicine, Samuel's condition worsened dramatically. His skin took on a grayish pallor, a chilling discoloration. His breathing became labored, a ragged struggle for air, and he began experiencing violent, uncontrollable episodes of vomiting and diarrhea. James Morrison, a man not easily swayed by panic, grew increasingly alarmed. He questioned whether they should seek help from the trading post to the east, a beacon of civilization, no matter how distant. But Father Morai, ever the master manipulator, counseled patience, his hand resting reassuringly on the younger man's shoulder. "Brother James," the preacher said, his voice imbued with a calm authority, "I have seen this sickness many times on the trail. It must run its course. Moving Samuel now would surely kill him. We must trust in the Lord's timing and Sister Constance's healing gifts." His words, laced with false piety and dire warnings, effectively trapped James in a web of fear and manufactured necessity. By the 6th day, young Tommy Morrison, barely 7 years old, began showing similar, horrifying symptoms, quickly followed by his 5-year-old sister, Mary. Sister Constance worked tirelessly, her movements efficient and seemingly compassionate, preparing more remedies, administering what she called purifying treatments, and keeping vigil over the increasingly sick family members. To James and Elizabeth, still healthy but utterly exhausted from caring for their loved ones, the woman truly seemed like a saint, sent by God to guide them through their unimaginable trial. The true horror, however, lay hidden beneath this veneer of devotion. The blessed remedies that Sister Constance administered with such apparent selflessness contained carefully measured, lethal doses of arsenic. The Graysons had discovered that this deadly poison could be easily obtained from local mining operations under the deceptive pretense of pest control. The symptoms, the agonizing stomach cramps, the relentless nausea, the ghastly skin discoloration, and the eventual inevitable organ failure, perfectly mimic those of various common trail diseases. This chilling precision made the murders virtually undetectable to grieving family members, who had already witnessed so much death and suffering during their brutal westward journey. The Grim Reaper, guided by the Graysons' hands, continued its work with relentless efficiency. Samuel Morrison, the family patriarch, died on the 7th day, his last breath a rattling gasp that echoed the family's dwindling hopes. Young Tommy followed on the 9th, his small body ravaged, and Mary, barely more than a toddler, succumbed on the 11th. Each death was accompanied by elaborate, meticulously performed Christian rituals led by Father Morai, whose voice, now a solemn instrument of deception, spoke movingly about the deceased joining their Heavenly Father and finding peace after their earthly suffering. The remaining family members, devastated by a grief so profound it numbed their senses, but paradoxically grateful for the Graysons' unwavering spiritual support, never once questioned the rapid succession of deaths. After all, had they not seen entire families succumb to disease on the trail? What they did not, could not, know was the chilling routine that unfolded each night. After the grieving survivors had exhausted themselves with weeping and prayer, collapsing into a fitful slumber, Brother Ezekiel would systematically search through the family's possessions. He made detailed inventories of everything of value, from the Morrisons' relatively prosperous belongings, fine furniture, quality tools, precious family heirlooms, to the substantial amount of gold coins that James, ever cautious, had sewn into hidden pockets of his clothing. On the 12th day, the insidious poison finally claimed James Morrison himself, as he began experiencing the telltale, agonizing symptoms. Elizabeth, now in the early vulnerable stages of labor, was consumed by terror. The thought of losing her husband, after already burying her children and father, pushed her to desperation. She begged Sister Constance to do everything possible to save him, clinging to the false hope of her healing gifts. The woman's response, later recounted, by those who eventually uncovered the truth, would be remembered as particularly chilling, a stark revelation of her depravity. "My dear child," Sister Constance said, holding Elizabeth's trembling hands, her voice a soft, deceptive lullaby, "some illnesses are God's way of calling His children home. We must not question His wisdom, only trust in His mercy. Your husband will join your precious babies in paradise, and you will raise your new child, knowing that your family awaits you in glory." James Morrison died on the 14th day, just hours before Elizabeth gave birth to a son who would live only long enough to be baptized by Father Murray. When Elizabeth herself, her body ravaged and beyond recovery from the same mysterious illness, succumbed 3 days later, the entire Morrison family had been wiped out in less than 3 weeks. To any outside observer who might have inquired about the family's fate, the Graysons had a perfectly reasonable, pious explanation. The Morrisons had arrived sick and exhausted, had contracted a virulent form of dysentery common to the trail, and had died despite the best efforts of the selfless Christian caregivers who had risked their own lives to provide comfort in their final hours. Father Murray, they would claim, had given them proper Christian burial in the chapel cemetery, and their possessions had been consecrated to the Lord's work, a chilling euphemism for theft that sounded appropriately pious. But the Morrison family's disappearance was only the beginning. The Graysons had discovered something that would transform their lives and terrorize the Oregon Trail for the next 36 years: murder, when executed with sufficient planning and religious justification, could be extraordinarily profitable. Success of their first family annihilation taught the Graysons invaluable, horrifying lessons that would shape their methodology for decades to come, forging them into the deadliest predators of the American frontier. The horrifying success of the Morrison family's annihilation profoundly shaped the Graysons' methodology for the coming decades. They learned quickly that isolated families were far easier targets than those traveling in large, protective groups. The insidious gradual onset of arsenic poisoning, they discovered, perfectly mimicked common trail ailments, offering a convenient and almost undetectable method of murder. Crucially, their self-assumed religious authority bestowed upon them an almost unlimited credibility with desperate, grieving people who, in their profound suffering, needed someone to blame besides God for their unbearable losses. Most chillingly, the Graysons realized that the Oregon Trail, with its endless flow of transient, unmoored families, provided them with an inexhaustible supply of victims who would often not be missed for months, if ever. Unlike settled communities, where disappearances would be quickly noticed and rigorously investigated, the trail was a fluid landscape of anonymity. A family vanishing in Oregon might not be expected to make contact with loved ones back east for 6 months or even more, and even then, the inherent dangers and unpredictable hardships of frontier life provided countless plausible explanations for their chilling silence. The months following the Morrison murders saw the Graysons refining their monstrous operation with meticulous, cold precision. They established patterns and procedures that would serve them terrifyingly well over the years, transforming their opportunistic crimes into a sophisticated, almost industrialized system of murder and theft. Brother Ezekiel, with his unassuming demeanor, became their dedicated scout. He rode the trail approaches, his eyes keen, identifying promising targets, families with obvious signs of wealth, those traveling alone or in small vulnerable groups, and especially those already dealing with illness or mechanical problems that left them desperate for aid. His ability to appear just in time became a grim signature. Sister Constance, meanwhile, relentlessly developed and refined her poisoning techniques. She experimented with different doses and delivery methods, meticulously calibrating the arsenic to achieve maximum effectiveness while maintaining an ironclad veil of plausible deniability. She discovered that arsenic, remarkably, could be easily disguised in seemingly benign herbal teas, medicinal tinctures, and even, chillingly, in communion wine, making it frighteningly simple to administer to entire families under the guise of spiritual or medical care. Simultaneously, Father Morai perfected the psychological manipulation that kept victims compliant, even as their loved ones withered and died around them. He became an expert at subtly discerning people's denominational backgrounds, tailoring his theological approach accordingly. For Methodist families, he would emphasize divine healing and the power of prayer. For Presbyterians, his focus shifted to predestination and God's unyielding, often inscrutable, ultimate plan. For Baptists, he stressed personal salvation and the comforting promise of heavenly reunion. His words were always a mirror of their deepest beliefs, reflecting false solace. The chapel itself, the very heart of their dark enterprise, underwent subtle yet significant modifications to support their murderous endeavor. The unusually large basement, once merely a storage area, was expanded and cunningly divided into multiple sections. One area served as a chilling repository for storing victims' possessions, methodically sorted and categorized like goods in a morbid warehouse. Another section was dedicated to the preparation of arsenic solutions, a macabre laboratory for death. A third area, the most disturbing, functioned as a temporary morgue where bodies could be kept while the Graysons calmly decided on disposal methods. Beyond the chapel, a series of unmarked graves were meticulously dug in a secluded grove of trees behind the building, hidden plots that would eventually hold the remains of hundreds of their victims. A silent, sprawling graveyard of broken dreams. The winter of 1852 to 1853, a period when the trail was largely empty, provided the Graysons with invaluable time to meticulously plan and prepare for the next year's killing season. They systematically sorted through the Morrison family's possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, and what to hide. This period also marked their first contact with black market dealers in larger Oregon settlements, establishing clandestine relationships with unscrupulous men who asked no questions about the origins of the valuable goods they purchased. Brother Ezekiel proved particularly adept at this aspect of their operation. His honest face and straightforward manner made him disturbingly believable when he claimed to be selling possessions on behalf of families who had supposedly decided to return. Easter had died of natural causes. He learned to space out his sales across multiple communities and to target different types of buyers for different categories of goods. Fine furniture and household items went to wealthy settlers looking to improve their homes. Sturdy tools and farming equipment were sold to practical farmers, and jewelry and precious metals found their way into the hands of merchants who specialized in such items. By the spring of 1853, the Graysons had transformed from amateur killers into professional predators, possessing a chillingly sophisticated understanding of their craft. They had resolved every practical problem: victim selection, murder methodology, body disposal, and profit realization. More importantly, they had perfected a public persona that rendered them virtually above suspicion, cloaked in piety and public service. The spring of 1853 brought with it renewed trail traffic and, for the Grayson family enterprise, fresh, horrifying opportunities. Their second major success came in May, when they encountered the Hoffman family. These German immigrants, speaking limited English and traveling with a wagon laden with valuable possessions, including fine craftsmanship tools, quality textiles, and a substantial amount of gold coins representing their entire life savings, were, in many ways, ideal victims. Their language barrier made them utterly dependent on the Graysons for communication with other travelers. Their foreign customs made them seem exotic and potentially suspicious to other, less tolerant trail users, reducing the likelihood of intervention. And their obvious wealth made them irresistible targets. Furthermore, their limited English meant they were less likely to understand subtle warnings or effectively communicate concerns to others. Heinrich Hoffman, the family patriarch, was a skilled clockmaker. Bringing his tools and trade goods to establish a business in Oregon, his dreams packed tightly in his wagon. His wife, Greta, was pregnant with their fourth child, and their three existing children ranged in age from 6 to 12. When mechanical problems with their wagon forced them to seek help near the Sacred Heart Chapel, the Graysons saw not a family in distress, but another opportunity to perfect their deadly craft. This time, they experimented with a slightly different approach. Instead of waiting for the family to develop a natural illness, Sister Constance began administering extremely small doses of arsenic almost immediately, cleverly disguised as preventive medicine to ward off trail diseases. She convinced the family that the blessed protection she offered would keep them healthy during their recovery period at the chapel. "My God," Heinrich said in his broken English when Sister Constance first offered her medicine, his face etched with gratitude. "You are so kind to strangers. God will bless you for helping us." Sister Constance replied with practiced sincerity, her eyes unwavering. "God has already blessed us by giving us the opportunity to serve His children in their time of need." The murder of the Hoffman family took nearly a month to complete, a meticulously extended timeline. This prolonged period, however, served the Graysons well. It allowed them to thoroughly inventory every valuable possession, from the intricate clockmaking tools to the quality trade goods, and to establish detailed, clandestine plans for their disposal. It also afforded them ample time to study the family's routines and relationships, gleaning knowledge that would prove invaluable in their future operations, lessons in human vulnerability. By the end of 1853, the Graysons had successfully murdered 3 complete families, totaling 16 people, their initial forays into mass murder proving chillingly efficient. They had begun to see their operation not as a series of desperate acts, but as a meticulously managed business, one that required the same careful planning and obsessive attention to detail as any other profitable enterprise. It was at this juncture that they began keeping meticulous records, not just of their victims' possessions, but of their methods, their perceived mistakes, and their chilling successes. These ledgers, discovered decades later in the chapel's hidden basement compartments, would eventually provide investigators with a horrifying, unparalleled window into the systematic and utterly depraved nature of the Grayson family's crimes. Written in Father Morai's precise, almost elegant handwriting, the ledgers contained detailed entries for each family they murdered, including their names, the dates of their demise, the possessions taken, the disposal methods used, and the cold, hard profits realized from selling the stolen goods. The entries were written in a detached, business-like style that treated human lives as mere inventory items, a testament to their complete moral decay. A typical entry, chilling in its banality, might read, "Morrison family. 5 souls departed. September-October 1852. Possessions included 2 gold coins, furniture items, quality tools. Bodies interred in Grove Section C. Estimated profit, $400. Method, arsenic via medicinal teas. Duration, 17 days. Lessons learned, reduce dose frequency to extend timeline and reduce suspicion." This was not just a record of their crimes. It was a horrifying blueprint of systematic extermination. As word of the Graysons' supposed charitable work spread along the trail, a dark irony unfolded. They began attracting victims actively seeking their help. Families who had heard about the good Christian folk who provided aid to desperate travelers would sometimes seek out the Sacred Heart Chapel specifically, walking directly into the very trap the Graysons had so carefully, so deviously constructed, their hope leading them to their doom. The executions and imprisonment of the Grayson family marked the grim, necessary end of one of the most horrific criminal enterprises in American frontier history. But the impact of their crimes extended far beyond the immediate victims and their grieving families. It sent shockwaves that fundamentally altered the very fabric of frontier society. The case permanently changed how travelers approached offers of help from strangers, instilling a deep, pervasive mistrust where once simple human kindness had reigned. It directly led to increased military patrols along major travel routes, an official acknowledgement of the dangers lurking unseen. Religious communities throughout the vast frontier territories were forced into a painful, introspective confrontation with the brutal reality that their most sacred faith and charitable instincts could be exploited, twisted, and weaponized by predators who understood precisely how to manipulate Christian charity for the darkest of evil purposes. Many legitimate missionaries and truly devout religious workers found that their sincere efforts to help travelers were now met with a chilling suspicion and palpable fear, as people struggled desperately to distinguish between genuine charitable work and potential criminal activity cloaked in false piety. The Graysons' crimes also exposed significant, glaring weaknesses in frontier law enforcement and communication systems. The family had been able to operate for more than a decade without detection, in large part because there was no effective way for authorities in different, isolated territories to share critical information about suspicious activities or missing persons. The case, a bloody catalyst, ultimately led to vital improvements in interterritorial communication and the establishment of more systematic, coordinated approaches to investigating missing persons reports, a direct, albeit tragic, legacy of the Graysons' reign of terror. Catherine Patterson, the remarkable survivor whose unwavering testimony had been so utterly crucial to the prosecution's success, never fully recovered from her traumatic, horrifying experience with the Grayson family. The psychological scars ran deep, enduring far longer than any physical wound. She spent the remainder of her life advocating tirelessly for improved protection of travelers, tirelessly working with nascent law enforcement agencies to identify and investigate suspicious activities at remote religious sites. Her personal tragedy transformed into a crusade for justice. Her nephew Timothy, the young boy who had played a game to save his life, grew to adulthood bearing his own profound psychological scars that affected his entire life. He never married, never had children of his own, and spent his adult years working as a frontier guide, dedicating his life to helping other families avoid the very dangers that had so brutally destroyed his own. He walked a path haunted by ghosts, a silent sentinel against the darkness. The physical locations where the Graysons had so cruelly operated were eventually abandoned and, in time, deliberately destroyed by local communities who wanted to eliminate all traces of the horrible crimes that had been committed there. The Sacred Heart Chapel, that perverse beacon of false hope, was burned to the ground in 1858, its timbers consumed by cleansing flames. The Mission of Divine Mercy, its name a mocking irony, was systematically dismantled, its materials repurposed for other, more innocent construction projects, its dark history symbolically erased. But the psychological impact of the Graysons' crimes lingered for generations, a chilling, persistent shadow. Families throughout the Western Territories told stories about the false missionaries who had murdered hundreds of innocent people, using these horrifying tales as grim warnings about the enduring dangers of trusting strangers who offered help on isolated, lonely trails. The case also raised profoundly disturbing questions about the very nature of evil and the terrifying capacity for seemingly ordinary people to commit extraordinary, systematic crimes. Father Morai, Sister Constance, and Brother Ezekiel had not been obviously deranged individuals nor visibly dangerous. They were intelligent, articulate people who had successfully posed as charitable, devout Christians for more than a decade, their facade impenetrable. Their chilling ability to maintain their deception while systematically murdering innocent families challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature, about the reliability of religious authority, and about the very possibility of discerning good from absolute evil. The case starkly demonstrated that evil could be methodical, meticulously organized, and chillingly sustained over long periods by individuals who outwardly appeared to be pillars of their communities, figures of trust and virtue. Perhaps most disturbing of all was the chilling realization that the Graysons had genuinely believed that their actions were justified. They had convinced themselves, through a twisted logic, that they were performing a twisted service by eliminating weak and diseased travelers, while simultaneously redistributing their possessions to more deserving recipients themselves. Their self-righteousness and utter lack of remorse suggested a form of moral corruption far more dangerous and insidious than simple greed or desperate necessity. The legacy of the Grayson family murders serves as a stark, enduring reminder that the American frontier was shaped not just by the courage and determination of honest pioneers, by their spirit of exploration and resilience, but also by the cunning predators who sought to brutally exploit their vulnerability and inherent trust. The 800 people who tragically died at the hands of these false missionaries represent a dark, indelible chapter in the sprawling story of westward expansion. Chapter that reveals the full, terrifying range of human capacity for both profound good and unspeakable evil. Their story stands as a chilling testament to the absolute importance of vigilance, the inherent dangers of blind trust, and the terrible, irreversible price that innocent people can pay when evil, in its most insidious form, disguises itself as righteousness. In the end, the Graysons' crimes remind us that the most dangerous predators are often those who understand exactly how to exploit our noblest, most fundamental instincts for their own malevolent purposes, turning compassion into a deadly snare. Today, more than a century and a half after the Graysons finally met their grim justice, their story continues to haunt the collective memory of the American West. The families they destroyed, the sacred trust they so utterly betrayed, and the countless lives they cut tragically short serve as permanent reminders that evil can flourish anywhere human vulnerability and desperation create opportunities for exploitation, especially when cloaked in deceptive robes. The enduring courage of survivors like Catherine Patterson, who risked everything, her life, her sanity, her very being, to expose the horrifying truth and seek justice for the dead, provides a vital counterpoint to the profound darkness of the Graysons' legacy. Her unwavering testimony not only brought the killers to justice, but also, in an immeasurable way, saved countless future lives by alerting authorities and the unsuspecting public to the insidious dangers posed by predators who ruthlessly used religious authority to mask their criminal activities. In remembering the Grayson family's crimes, we honor not just the victims who died, swallowed by the wilderness and deception, but also the survivors who found the impossible strength to fight back against overwhelming evil and ensure that justice, however belated, was finally served. Their story reminds us that even in humanity's darkest moments, when faith is corrupted and hope is a fragile flicker, there are always those who will stand up for truth and refuse to let evil triumph unchallenged. What do you think about this chilling tale from America's frontier past? Does it change how you view the romanticized stories of westward expansion, revealing a hidden darker underbelly? The Grayson family's systematic exploitation of Christian charity reveals the most disturbing aspects of human nature and the terrible price of misplaced trust. If this story has given you chills and made you think about the hidden dangers that lurked on those seemingly endless frontier trails, share it with someone who loves dark historical mysteries. Hit that like button to support content that brings these forgotten horrors to light, and subscribe so you never miss the disturbing truths that shaped America's past. The next time you hear stories about the brave pioneers who conquered the American West, remember that they also had to survive. Predators like the Graysons, people who turned murder into a family business and hid their evil behind the mask of religious devotion.